Welcome to the living room. My name is JoAnna Davis, and I'm here today with my wonderful co-host Jody Jewett.
Hello.
We're here today to share a story of a beautiful woman that has come from some very dark places into a place where her journey now is to spread love and to share with others all the things that she's overcome. So we want to welcome today Tessa Jones.
Thank you.
Wonderful. I'm so glad that you're here today.
Me too.
Yes. So we have been talking, I think we met in 2010, right?
Yep.
2010. And we started working together with Parent Partner Program. And I remember just watching you grow when you started there, and you and I built this relationship, and here we are 10 years later, and we're sitting in my living room, and I really want you to share your story with our audience today, with the people that are watching, because I think that your story is amazing. So I don't know. I don't know where you want to begin, but I'd like for you to share a little bit about where you were and where you are now.
Okay. So I'm going to start with my childhood. I grew up in a home of drug addicts and drug dealers. I seen lots of things, had our door kicked in growing up. And I used to be determined that I wasn't ever going to be like them. Well, when I was 14 years old, I met this guy, and I met him at my first job at Burger King. And he was a cook, and I was a front person. And I thought he was this really great guy. We'll come to find out, too. He was a big drug dealer. I took off and ran to Texas with him. He gave me like all the finer things. We owned our own business. I lived in this $100,000 house at 14, driving brand new vehicles. But he used to beat me. If I even said the wrong thing, or when I tried to learn how to make Spanish rice, for instance, I burned it a little bit, and he beat me and black and blued my eyes so bad that I had to put raw meat on my face because I couldn't see out of my eye. I stayed with him for a few years, 4 years. He got in trouble. The police were looking for him, and he ran to Mexico, and he took me with him. I didn't stay long. He beat me. He stripped me naked and beat me with a belt from my neck down. And we were living at a house where there was about 500 pigs on the farm at the time. And he told me that he was going to take me outside and let them eat me alive.
My goodness. That
next day, I told him, I said, hey, let me go across the border, because we was in Juarez, Mexico. Mm-hmm. And El Paso's right there. And if you go across the border, there's payphones. Well, back then there was. I don't know about now because I've never been back.
Right.
But when I went across the border to call my mom, because my mom owed him money back in the day, he was watching me, but I went to the guards and I said his name and let them know that he was wanted and that he beat me, and I just opened my shirt and showed him the marks, and I said, please help me. And they called the police. The Border Patrol did, and they came and got me. The cops took me to the bus station, and they got me a ticket to come back to Iowa. And I never turned back to that relationship.
So what were you feeling during those moments? I mean, that had to have been really scary, really just scary to be so young and but be brave, because that was a brave move to walk away knowing that if he got to you, knowing what you were attempting to do, how
And I can tell you that if I ever saw him to this day in the United States, I'm going to be the first one to dial 911.
Okay.
Because he did tell me that he will come back for me one day.
Wow.
So I still to this day fear him.
Mm-hmm. So do you know where his whereabouts are now? Have you ever heard anything since then?
So on my old Facebook, I had a couple of his relatives on there. I know that he is now married in Mexico. He's got 2 daughters, and I hurt for them girls because I seen how he was with me and I seen how he was with his nieces. So I just hope he's not doing the same thing to them that he did back then. But it's been so many years. It's been over 20 years now.
Wow.
So hopefully he's changed. But do I want to know anything about him? No.
No. Yeah, I don't blame
He took
you.
a lot from me
At a young age.
at a very young age and put me through a lot at a very young age.
Was he much older than you?
He was at that time like 5 or 6 years older than me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there was some age.
There was, and when I ran away with him to Texas at first, my grandmother had custody of me because I lived with her, and I told her, you can either let me marry him or you're never going to see me again. So my grandma was, she believed that if she let me marry him, he would be responsible, and if anything did happen to me, she could go back on him, and that she would know where I was at.
Sure.
But she didn't want to do it. It took a lot of convincing from me, but back then I was a very stubborn teenager.
Sure.
That you couldn't tell me nothing.
Sure. So did you get married?
Yeah, I married him.
Okay, so you did marry him.
Yep,
okay.
I did marry him.
Wow. Wow, what an experience to have to really go through that at such a young age.
And on our wedding day, my family was all out in the living room and outside of our house, and he was beating me up in the bathroom.
Wow.
So I don't know why I stayed, but
Young.
I did. I was young.
Yeah.
Didn't know.
Sense
no
of
better.
security probably.
Yeah.
At the time, with the fact that you grew up in a family with drugs and, I'm sure there was some
Alcohol.
abuse.
Absolutely.
Because usually that's kind of the pattern that happens for us, when we're brought up in environments like that. We tend to say we're not going to be like that,
But we end up being like that.
But we end up.
So when I grew up, I watched my stepdad beat my mom, and one of the times he did it in front of me, and I picked up it was a wine cooler bottle, Bartles and James. I'll never forget the bottle. And I picked it up, and I was like this at him, and I was like, "Don't ever hit my mom again in front of me, please." I said. So then he took the bag of garbage that was there, and he threw it at me, and
Wow.
I called my grandma, and DHS had found him guilty 3 times of child abuse. So that's when I finally got to go live with my grandma.
I see. Okay. Because I was wondering how.
I kind of jumped ahead. Sorry.
No, it's okay. No. This is perfectly fine. I just was curious on how you had left your family, your mom, and ended up with your grandma. Because I knew there was a story there.
And at the time, my mom was on drugs.
Sure.
And my mom was blinded as well by her husband, because she married him. But they made her decide, either she let me go live with my grandma, which that's what I wanted. I wanted to go live with my grandma because my grandma was my everything since I was a little girl.
Right. Those grandmas.
That's who I got most of my morals and values from, was from my grandmother. I was happy to go live with my grandma, so.
Yeah. I had a grandma like that too.
Mm-hmm.
Grandmas are special.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yes.
They got something, boy.
I wanted to ask about, I know you said that you let the Border Patrol, know, what you were going through. That, I just wanted to ask, how did you feel? Did you feel like you could trust them? I mean, that's an unfamiliar territory.
So at that point, the night before when he beat me with the belt, and I knew that if he put me outside with those pigs, and the blood on me, that they would have never found me. I would have not been found.
Right.
I would have been gone.
Yes.
So at that point, that next day, I was so scared, and I didn't care what was going to happen next, but I was going to try everything to save my life.
Amen. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The Lord was with you.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
If God wasn't with me, I would have never made it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me, now you're on a bus coming back to Iowa,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
So what happened after that?
So when I got back here, let's see. First of all, I pawned my $8,000 diamond ring for like $1,500. I used it to buy drugs to make money. At this time, I still had never used drugs before. I thought I could make money. So that didn't happen. I more or less got robbed. I learned my lesson there to sell drugs that wasn't for me at that time for a small period of time. So I moved with my mom. I was staying with her, and then I met my second husband. We got an apartment together.
So how old were you around this time?
So I lived with my mom and just kind of did my thing I was 18, 19 years old at that time.
Okay.
Yeah. So I lived with my mom for a short time. I got my own apartment, and then I got an apartment with my childhood best friend, and she just had a baby. So we were living in an apartment together, and she was into selling drugs. So I ended up following in her footsteps. She introduced me to my first husband, or my second husband is what happened. And he was using drugs. We were clashing because I didn't use drugs, but I sold them. So we were clashing a lot. In this apartment that I got, there was a bedroom, a kitchen, a bathroom, and over here was the living room. Well, the living room had a door with a lock on it, like a bedroom. It was kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody would go in there and use drugs. And there was me, Tessa, who sat in the bedroom and didn't do nothing. So I got really mad one day, and I was like, all right, I want to know what you guys all get out of this. But none of them would do drugs with me. So I ended up, for the first time, going in the bathroom and snorting methamphetamine.
Jeez.
And it scared me, so I called my aunt, and I'm like, oh my God, this is what just happened. You got to come get me. I don't know what's going on with me. From that point on, it was a downward spiral for me. I ran the streets, I ran the bars, because back then you could get into the Mexican bars. And that's what I was dating a Mexican guy at the time.
Sure.
So it was easy to get into the bars.
Mind you, it was pretty easy to get in almost any bar back in our day.
Yes, it was.
I was in quiet as kept. I went to T&T.
Yeah, I'll never forget that place. Oh my gosh.
Not that that's anything to brag about.
No, but yeah.
I remember we're all around the same age, so it was easy to get in those places. But go ahead.
So, me and him, we ended up getting a different apartment. I found out I was pregnant. I was about 20 years old at this time. I stopped using drugs because I got pregnant. He didn't stop using drugs. He ended up turning from methamphetamine. Well, I thought all he did was methamphetamine at the time, but I found out later on that he was using crack cocaine as well.
Okay.
So that took it to a whole nother level for me, because he would hide in our bathroom for hours and act like he's taking a shower or a bath. And I'm like, you don't take a bath for an hour and a half. There's something else going on. So I started kicking in doors, like the bathroom door, to catch him. because I was like, listen, I don't want that stuff even done around me. I'm pregnant. I have brand new baby stuff. I don't want that stuff around my baby stuff. So he ended up taking off and leaving. We ended up getting back together again. I had my son. I did really good for, I don't know, 4 to 6 months after I had him.
Sure.
Then I started using drugs again. I was a pretty functional addict at that time, though. I went to bed every night. I made sure that I laid down and went to sleep every night for at least 4 to 5 hours because I never wanted to be grumpy or be short with my child. In the house that we moved to, so I moved to this nice house because I was selling large amounts of drugs. I mean, large amounts of drugs. I was in way over my head.
Sure.
At this time. Then I got pregnant with my daughter, who is now 20, and my son is 21. And we moved to this really nice house off of Hickman Road. Remodeled it. So if you did drugs in my house, you had to do them in the basement. And I had this air filter thing that sat by the furnace to filter the air because I thought I was being this good mom, which I wasn't because I was doing drugs.
Sure.
So that's when the state narcotics unit busted in my door. Me and my kid's dad, which I married him as well, were upstairs sleeping. And one child was in bed with us and one child was in a playpen next to us at that time. They searched our home, of course. They found lots of stuff. We went to jail. They let me call my mom, and my mom came, and it was either my mom or my grandma. I can't remember for sure. They came and took my kids. We got an open DHS case. We both got out on pretrial release because we had never been in trouble before. I had never been in trouble before. Never even had a speeding ticket at this point in my life.
Now, how old were you then?
So I was probably 22, 23 years old around then.
Okay.
No, maybe 23, 24, somewhere in there. Because I had my son when I was 21.
Sure.
So we were out on bond. They ended up taking him back in, and we didn't understand why they took him back in one day when we went to go see the pretrial officers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, come to find out to it, like 2 weeks after they took him in and we couldn't figure out why, I was sleeping on my couch at my home and my kids were not there because they weren't allowed to be there. They were at their other grandparents, because I had a DHS case and wasn't allowed to be there. So they would come and remove the kids and I would go in and clean the house because I felt like my mom or my grandma, nobody could clean my house the way I cleaned my house.
Sure.
And I always wanted it to stay clean for the kids. But I heard a knock on the door and I was like, who is it? And they said, FBI. So I opened my door, and it was the federal government. They had a search warrant to search my house. They did not find anything in my home because I really wasn't doing nothing at that time.
Sure.
They took me in. I had to go see a federal judge that day. The judge let me out on my own OR because I had never been in trouble, and that's what they do with the federal government. And then I had to report to a probation officer and stuff like that. So I was doing really good for a small period of time. I knew that my life was crumbling right then.
Sure.
I not only had state charges facing on me, I had just lost my kids. The federal government came in on me. I knew that it was just going to be all bad for me. So instead of trying to still do better and be able to eventually turn myself into federal prison, I went off and I got high. from that point on, I wasn't on the street maybe a month, and my federal PO arrested me, and I went and sat in the very old Polk County Jail.
Wow.
The one that is now a courthouse and is no longer there.
Yes.
I went there. I spent 8.5 months in that jail, waiting for my federal stuff to be done with. I got sentenced, I think it was 7 years and some odd months, or 6 years and some odd months. I did 4.5 years federal. Because I had a state case pending, though, back in this all happened in 2002.
Sure.
And I was involved in a very big drug raid, the federal drug raid. We hit the newspapers. There was like $1.3 million found and lots of drugs. They did a very well investigation. They had the big people, they had my main person, and then they came down the line and got all us little people.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was over with. They knew everything there was to know. There was no denying that, no, that was not me. There was no, yes, you're right, that's me. Mm-hmm. That's all I could say. Yep, you're right, that's me. I did that. There's nothing I can do. So because I had a state case too, back then they ran your time concurrent, so I got to go to Mitchellville to do my 18 months on my 10-year sentence that I got for the state case.
Sure. Okay.
And the feds counted that time as well as towards my fed time. So then when I was done with my 18-month mandatory, they paroled me to my federal detainer. I went through Oklahoma, all them places, went to federal prison. I went to a camp and got to do the drug program. And in the camp, during the drug program, I was one of the lucky ones who got to take a 3-day furlough. So I got to leave the federal prison from Illinois, because I was in Illinois.
Okay.
And I got to come back to Iowa, to Des Moines, Iowa for 3 days and spend with my family, because I think it was 2 months. It's right when it was either 2 or 4 months left of your prison sentence. And if you were doing good in the RDAP program, you got to do that. Not very many people got to do that. If you got to take that furlough, it was a blessing.
Right.
So I came home and I spent time with my kids and did lots of things with them. One of the hardest things I ever did was to take myself back to that prison, because a part of me wanted to never go back. But I knew that if I went back and I just did those little months that I had left, that it was going to be all right.
So who had the kids?
So my mom, so I left them with my grandmother. And so I got caught and went to prison in 2002. In 2003, my grandmother, who was my world, who I left the kids with, got cancer and got really sick. And when I was in Mitchellville, I had to decide at that time, because she was the last person who had guardianship of me. Mm-hmm. So I got to choose her funeral or a bedside visit. And I picked a bedside visit because I didn't want my last memory of her to be in a casket.
Right.
I wanted to be able to go see her physically and talk to her. I wrote her this really pretty poem that was buried with her. I have a copy of it as well, still to this day. And I got to read it to her. And she told me, I know that you think I'm not listening, but I can hear you. I just can't open my eyes. She had cancer in between, I think it was the liver and gallbladder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That was a blessing as well, because if you had did your fed time first,
I wouldn't have been able to go.
You wouldn't have been able to go.
They did have to ask the feds for permission.
Yeah.
So during that time, they approved it. She was at Lutheran Hospital at the time. Mm-hmm. So I had 2 officers who escorted me.
Wow. And
I had to walk through Lutheran Hospital with shackles and handcuffs. Mm-hmm. It was the most humiliating thing I ever had to go through. Like, being normal and everybody looking at me as I'm walking through the hospital like that.
Yeah.
But I knew I was doing it for the right reason.
You're so brave.
Yeah. And it was hard, but I didn't want to not be able to say goodbye to her.
Amen.
Because she was my rock.
I knew there was
Yeah.
a reason why I loved you so much.
Yeah, she was my rock.
Yeah. You are amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes we have to go through stuff.
Yeah.
To really see how strong we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My therapist tells me I'm a very strong person. It just blows him away.
Yes.
Wow.
So we'll move ahead. Sorry, I didn't mention that.
No, it's okay. That's why we.
Yeah, because it's hard to always remember everything.
Absolutely.
So
you had to go back to the prison.
Yep, and I was in the prison. I finished off my time. I graduated the RDAP program very successfully. I met a lot of amazing people in there. My mom and my 2 kids got to come pick me up when I got out.
So was your mom off of drugs?
So my mom, yes. So my mom, we'll backtrack a second. My mom went to prison in 98. And she came home. I had my son March of 99, and she came home November of 99, and she completely changed her life and has never used drugs since.
Wow.
My mom is a totally different person. She's a very high believer in God.
Wonderful.
She couldn't have done it without God. She is a completely different person now.
So she was able to take the
when
children.
my grandma got sick, my mom stepped up. My mom had to do a lot of proving to DHS because at that time it was still early and my case wasn't completely closed
Sure.
because they were working on the adoption.
Sure.
And so my mom paid to prove herself. She went and paid. Every time they wanted a UA, she paid for the UA and gave a UA, and she proved herself. And the same judge who revoked my mom and sent her to prison
Oh my goodness.
is the same judge that granted her the adoption of my 2 kids.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now that
Amazing.
And we
is
have a
God.
picture of him and my mom and the kids together.
It's gonna make me cry.
Yeah. So it was great. And I'm just glad they got to stay with family. And he told my mom too that he was very proud of her, that he, last time he seen her, he was sending her to prison, and now he's granting her an adoption of her grandchildren.
My goodness, restoration.
Yeah.
Wow. The power of God, how he can change our lives.
Yeah.
For his divine purpose.
It's definitely him.
Yeah. So
I came home from prison. I was doing really well. I was going to a federal aftercare program. I met my 11-year-old now, his dad. I never sold drugs. I have never sold drugs since I went to prison.
Hi.